Hi everyone, thank you for tuning in to the latest Hurricane Tracker app video update recorded Wednesday, September 28th at about 9 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Well, Invest 97L was upgraded this morning to Tropical Storm Matthew. It is bringing tropical storm conditions with winds up to 65 miles per hour this evening. Here in the portions of the Lesser Antilles, we have tropical storm warnings in effect for Guadeloupe, Martinique, St. Lucia, Dominica, Barbados, St. Vincent, and the Grenadine Islands here. You can see that outlined pretty well on the National Hurricane Center forecast map. The center of the storm has actually already passed the islands, and most of the tropical storm force winds are occurring here on the northern side of this warning area where we have the tropical storm warnings. And again, winds are at 65 miles per hour. It's moving towards the west at 15 miles per hour. The National Hurricane Center calls for slow, steady strengthening to the next few days. The system could even take a dive briefly towards the west southwest, and it is forecasted to become a hurricane sometime Friday afternoon and then strengthen to a Category 2 or maybe even Category 3 hurricane late this weekend and early next week as it approaches southeast Jamaica and Cuba. And I do want to stress, if you are watching this video and you're located in the National Hurricane Center cone, anywhere really, Haiti, eastern Cuba, Jamaica, the Cayman Islands, I'm not going to try to hype this, but everything we see indicates this could be a very powerful hurricane. Really, anywhere I'm thinking from a Category 2 to a Category 3, possibly even a Category 4 is not out of the question. Right now, the National Hurricane Center is being conservative with a Category 2, but we are expecting, uh, you know, impacts from a powerful hurricane. And those of you in these regions need to start to begin thinking about preparations, and we'll talk about more of that here in a few minutes with our alert levels. But we are expecting big impacts for some region within this cone here late this weekend into early next week. Now, this could change a little bit, and I want to spend the rest of the video talking about the steering pattern and the complexities. You know, Joaquin last year, which was located over the southwest Atlantic, as many of you know, was a very, very difficult forecast. And in some ways, I'm seeing this as even a more difficult forecast, if you could believe, because there's so many complexities with the steering pattern, especially as we move into more of a fall pattern across North America. But let's start out in the short term, the next few days through about this weekend. You can see the GFS American model on your left. We've got the European model on the right. And if you look at both maps and you compare, we have a upper level low with an associated trough of low pressure located over the Great Lakes. We have Matthew down here in the central Caribbean. We're going to have a area of high pressure located over the southwest Atlantic. And I want you to look at the differences here. The GFS American model is forecasting a little bit deeper trough, so extending down here into the northern Gulf of Mexico, and it has a weaker area of high pressure. You can see the western edge of this high pressure, it kind of ends between the East Coast and Bermuda, where if you look at the European model, the trough of low pressure is not as deep, but the area of high pressure extends further towards the south and the west. And hurricanes and tropical storms are steered by these upper level features. So, area of high pressure, the winds flow clockwise here, and that's what's pushing the storm towards the west. And you can see there's a little more of a break or a weakness, if you want to call it, in the GFS model. And that's why the GFS model has been turning this storm towards the north quicker than some of these other models have, such as the GFDL, the European model, the European ensembles, and even the Canadian some runs. So each model has a different forecast on where these features are going to be located here late this weekend, and also the strength. So if this low pressure extends it to the Gulf of Mexico and the high pressure is weaker and further east, it creates an easy alleyway for the system to turn north here east of Florida. And of course it would be unfortunately impacting the areas we just discussed as well as the Bahamas. But if this ridge is a little bit stronger and extends further west and south, and the trough is not as deep, we could actually I see a possibility where this system could move closer towards Florida, or even an outside chance it could still wind up in the eastern Gulf of Mexico. And I'll show you a little bit more on that here in just a moment. Now, even longer term is if we didn't have enough issues in the short term with the pattern. If we look at the long term, closer to not this weekend but next weekend, the main difference is the GFS is a lot faster. By Friday, October the 8th, it already has it over the Canadian Maritimes, whereas Saturday, that was Friday, October 7th. Saturday, October 8th, the European model still has it here over the Bahamas. Now, the faster this storm can move and make that right-hand turn, the more of a chance it's going to have, as the GFS shows, to be picked up by this trough and be steered away from the United States. Even that's not a guarantee, but there's more chance of that happening if it moves faster, or unfortunately, we could have a system into the Canadian Maritimes. Now, if the system moves slower, as the European model is indicating, and makes that right-hand turn a little farther west, there's still time for this trough to move out and a ridge of high pressure to rebuild here over the eastern seaboard in the western Atlantic basin. And that's why some of these European ensemble members have this system possibly going closer to Florida or to the Gulf of Mexico. The flow around this again would be from east to west, and that can move the system again closer to Florida or into the eastern Gulf. So that is one option that's on the table. We still see the option available for the GFS to take this out, but I want to stress that the GFS has been trending closer towards the European model. It may be minute changes from run to run, but overall, not 100% of the time, but most of the time, the European model is a far superior model at handling these upper level features. So we cannot completely close the door on the Gulf of Mexico. Absolutely can't close the door on Florida. We can't close it up the eastern seaboard as well. So there's still a lot of questions. We have more questions than answers. Unfortunately, the models that we have are not good enough yet to tell us exactly what's going to happen 7 to 10 days from now. And even to complicate it even further, you can see it on the left edge of this image, but as we get into weekend after next, we have another trough of low pressure coming in. So if we still have the system lingering down here, it could help to pick it up and could be a second bus stop, if you want to say, out away from the coast. So the timing of the storm, the strength of the storm, the stronger it gets in the short term, the quicker it's going to make that right-hand turn like the GFS is showing. But right now, I'm thinking it's going to stay weaker, tropical storm, and then become a hurricane later this week and into the weekend. And then I think somewhere in this region here, let me turn the cursor back on, from eastern Cuba to central Cuba is ultimately where I think this turn is going to occur, mainly because of the strength and the speed of the storm, as well as the strength of this high pressure ridge that the European has been forecasting here over the open Atlantic. So here is the European ensembles. It's 50 different runs of the European, and just they are initialized at different variables, and each of the circle is a different model. The darker blues and purples indicate a deeper storm, stronger pressure, lower pressure. And you can see day 5, for a 5-day forecast, this isn't too bad. They're kind of clustered in one region here in the west central Caribbean Sea. Now, as you go further out in time, they extend from the western Gulf of Mexico, and you can't see it here, but all the way up into New England. So we have quite a spread. It's kind of each man on their own here as to where you want to pick where this system is going to end up. It's kind of like setting up a dartboard at 10 days and just throwing the darts and just seeing where it lands. But what I want to point out is there's a reason the European ensemble, run after run, has maybe about half of the 50 members in the Gulf of Mexico. Now, I'm not saying that's not going to happen. I'm not saying that's going to happen or that's the forecast track, but a lot of these ensemble members of the European show a much slower moving system, and before it has time to get kicked out to sea, new high pressure builds on top of it, and the winds around that help push it into the eastern Gulf of Mexico. So until the European ensemble stops forecasting this, I'm not going to give up the option into the Gulf of Mexico. And you can see they're forecasting a lot of these a major hurricane, unfortunately. I'm not going to focus too much on intensity this far out. Um, Now let's look at the GFS ensembles. The map's a little bit different, but each red um, pair of numbers here is where different ensemble member has it. So you can see the European is tightly together here, and then as you go out in time they spread apart. But if you look at the GFS, they're a lot closer together. By day 6, none of the GEFS ensembles have the member in the Gulf or over Florida. Now if you go another day or two out, they start spreading out a little bit, and that's normal to see at this time frame. But a lot of these are still even forecasting landfalls along the mid-Atlantic or the New England coast. So we can't rule out the Gulf of Mexico for the reasons I just outlined, and we can't rule out a strike on the eastern seaboard, New England, or the Canadian Maritimes based on the GFS. In the end, one of these ensemble runs, either the GFS ensemble or the European ensembles, going to be completely wrong. Maybe not completely for the European, because it's showing some going up the east coast and some into the Gulf of Mexico. But if this system moves slow and the ridge has time to rebuild and it doesn't catch this first trough, this first bus out to sea, then the GEFS is going to be almost completely wrong. It'll be a complete bust. But for now, we have to respect each set of models and be aware that our science is not good enough yet to let us know which one is right. So anybody from Texas through the Gulf Coast, Florida, up the whole eastern seaboard into Canada, the door's wide open. We can't rule anything out yet until maybe even this weekend, early next week, another 5 days or so. But in the short term, the next 5 days, these are our alert levels. We have guarded alert levels here over Haiti, Jamaica, and then, elevated alert levels. And that means you have an increased risk of being impacted by a tropical cyclone. Start building or restocking your basic disaster supply kit. Gather water, flashlight, batteries, chargers, cash, first aid supplies, and familiarize yourself with your local emergency plans. And make sure that if hurricane warnings are issued, you know what your plan is. That's what that means. Those of you in Cuba, track is a little more uncertain. It's further out in time, but still definitely guarded alert levels. And even those of you located here in the northwestern coast of the South American continent, we could see a west-southwest dive, and we have even tropical storm watches down here. So, of course, right now we have tropical storm conditions ongoing. That'll continue through the night and then ease up in the early morning hours. So, hope this gave you some context. I wish I could tell you where it was going after 5 days, but I'm going to be honest, we can't. As I just showed in these models, they're all over the place, and we're going to be looking for trends, with the runs, not necessarily what one model shows, but looking for trends. And hopefully in a few days we can give you more clarity on where this is going. Right now, no imminent threat to the United States. Let's just keep an eye on it, see what happens, and pray that the system does not get too strong for our friends down in the Caribbean. All right, thank you for watching. We'll do another video update. Once this picture changes enough, we have a different explanation, because these will change with time. Thanks for using the Hurricane Tracker app, for watching our video. Have a good night, everybody.